So meet Hussein Iqbal. He arrived in Singapore mid-2012 after paying about $8,000 to his agent, which he continues to pay with the help of his brother. And a year after his arrival, he fell from a significant height while working on what was later discovered to be unstable construction rigging. He suffered from hairline fractures in what was later discovered to be a serious head injury. In such cases, could you tell me how much leave you expect a doctor to grant? Would anyone take a guess? Perhaps a week's leave, or maybe even complete hospitalization? Hussein luckily did get to a doctor, but he got 1 day of medical leaves, and he was given a letter of guarantee for 3 subsequent visits to the doctor, but after that was left to pay for his own MRI scans. Eventually, and slowly, his condition did improve, but his employer feared that there would be further complications with regard to his health, and thus he was forced into unemployment. He lodged an injury claim with the MOM and now lives with his brother, who is also a low-wage worker and has to bear the burden of paying for Hussein's accommodation. Lack of money makes it difficult for Hussein to contact his family, so he's only able to do so once every 2 weeks or even 3 weeks. When asked about his situation, he said, "There is dignity in being a worker, as I know I have an income and can support my family, but now that has also been taken away from him." He stated that he hated his former company and recollected incidents where he was threatened to be repatriated and even physically abused several times. His company deducted $50 from his salary every month, and now the company owes him about $400 in total. So good evening to everyone present here. My name is Madhura, and together with my group members Jeannie and Leah, we would like to present the topic of mistreatment of migrant workers in Singapore. And just so we're clear about the category of migrant workers we're talking about, we're referring to workers who do blue-collar jobs and on work permits in Singapore. Throughout this presentation, you will be introduced to individuals such as Hussein. It is important that we know of their stories and sufferings because they are representatives of the mistreatment that about 65% of Singapore's migrant worker population faces.
So did Hussein ever get his $400 back?
That's a good question. Hussein certainly never did get his money back, despite the claims he lodged against MOM. Moving on, I'd like to start by asking everyone this question. Do you think low-wage factories of MNCs located in China, Mexico, or Bangladesh represent opportunity or exploitation? Let me explain what economic exploitation looks like. It can be defined as using someone's labor, but giving an unfair compensation in return. Exploitation is nowadays mostly taking place in factories in Asia, Africa, and South America. The workers in these factories are paid low, and they work in very bad conditions. What if I told you that the same thing is happening right here in Singapore? Migrant workers in Singapore are paid as low as $2 per hour, and they work in dangerous conditions at all hours of the day, and they're placed in overcrowded rooms and unsanitary dorms. Let me ask you again then, is this opportunity or exploitation? Does your home look anything like this? This is the home of an average migrant worker in Singapore. Dorm space is far from the equivalent of what we take for granted, a place of relaxation and rest after a tiring day, or a shell of privacy where people don't come barging in. To lower accommodation costs, many employers house their migrant workers within dorms that squeeze an average of 30 to 40 beds in a room. The workers cook and sleep in the same space, and there could be four showers and 1 toilet for up to the dorms. A rubbish bin centre in MacPherson Vista. At least 3 other bin centres in Yishun, Bukit Batok, and Bukit Panjang also serve as homes to foreign workers who are hired to clean estates. This phenomenon was first reported in the Straits Times almost 20 years ago, but up to today it still exists. Bin centres are dirty and unsanitary, but most workers prefer living here than to have the cost of an approved dorm deducted from their salary. They would rather have more money to send home than to spend on comfortable accommodation. Speaking of money, let's talk about the average wage of a migrant worker. We conducted a survey and found out that most people estimate the average wage to be $7 per hour. In fact, some even estimate it to be as high as $15 per hour. However, the truth is that the salaries of migrant workers have remained stagnant in the past decades, and many of them only earn $2 to $5 per hour. Let me introduce you to Shomos. He was promised $800 to $900 a month for working 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. But only after he paid the full amount and received his ticket to fly from Dhaka to Singapore did he receive the IPA for work permit. And on this work permit, he realized that he will only receive $270 a month. Shobo's worked for Samsung C&T between October 2011 and January 2012, and within this time, he only managed to send home $1,350. And to achieve this, he had to work 160 hours of overtime, and he took no days off. Low wage and poor living conditions aside, migrant workers will often find themselves in precarious situations, especially at construction sites. While most of the population are worried about stocking up on mosquito repellents, it should be noted only 7 people have died from dengue. In comparison, the number of workplace deaths hit 42 on the 1st of July of 2016. Within 5 weeks on August 8, the number of deaths increased to 46. This doesn't even take into account the number of work injuries that occurred. Those who are injured are either denied compensation or sufficient medical leave, while those who are too injured to work are either jobless or being deported.
But wait, aren't there laws to prevent this from happening?
Let me remind you of what Martin Luther once said. Never forget that everything Hitler did in Germany was legal. Today I'll be examining the shortcomings of the laws that are put up to protect these migrant workers, and more specifically, I'll be touching on the shortcomings of the law in relation to their salary, their lodging, and their medical benefits. Foreign workers hold on to work permits in Singapore, and what this means is that employers are able to cut off the permits anytime, and workers will have to return to their home countries within 1 week of cancellation. Moreover, they are not allowed to switch employers except with the prior approval of MOM or their employers, which is virtually non-existent. Can you imagine what implications this have on these workers? A quick check at the MOM's website shows this. It seems rather comprehensive, where workers have a fixed monthly salaries, and employers are required by law to provide for them their housing, their food, and medical attention. Moreover, they are also protected from falling into debt before they even enter Singapore to work. But how much of this is actually enforced? I'm sure many of you have seen this picture before. It's a pathetic envelope with a figure scribbled on it. This is actually the kind of paycheck that some migrant workers get. Although the MOM's law stipulates that all migrant workers should get a paycheck that they can keep, this is not often the case, and 33% of them do not, according to a survey by Transient Workers Council in 2016. Let us examine the case of Debna Prakash and Muhammad Shafiq. These two workers worked for 4 months without getting any salary, and they lodged a complaint to MOM, which later referred them to the Labour Court. This case took on a few months, and they were not allowed to take on get away so easily with all these things. Moving on to housing, which is another big issue. Under the Employment of Foreign Manpower Act, employers who do not provide adequate housing for their workers face a fine of up to $10,000 and imprisonment of up to 12 months per offence. But what does adequate housing even mean though? Is it this? To put this in perspective, MOM has stated that it has performed more than 2,600 housing inspections just last year, and they have taken enforcement action for more than 2,100 employers. And we can see that this happened just last year in 2015. This is only a recent phenomenon, and workers have been living under such filthy conditions all the while. On the aspect of medical care, workers only receive medical wages if A. The doctor gives the worker an MC that declares them unfit for work, or B. MOM determines that the injury is work-related. Often, employers resort to unscrupulous means of reducing their own costs through colluding with doctors to give them inadequate treatment and reduce the MC given. Also, they also deny it as workplace injury to prevent having to pay out insurance or giving them medical benefits. Many of these workers face medical complications as a result of delayed treatment. How can we as a society stand back and watch all of these things happen to them? These workers are clearly on the shorter end, where they are unable to speak up for fear of being repatriated, and they only can tolerate such inhumane treatment. Sadly, this is what many Singaporeans also think, and we see this unleashed in the wake of the Little India riots in 2013, where these mean comments were posted online. This goes to show what is really on the mind of Singaporeans, and it's no wonder such atrocities are allowed to perpetuate. However, there's a lack of action towards their cause, which begs the question, what can we do about this?
First and foremost, I'd like to highlight the importance of a change in our attitude towards migrant workers and how it could affect their lives. As it has been rightly said, The government sees foreign workers as economic digits here to help grow the economy, so they look at them as commodities. In 2008, when workers' dormitories were to be built near a residential estate at Serangoon Gardens, there was a massive outcry by the residents of the area to stop the construction of the dormitories, and some of them even formed petitions against it. In the end, however, the dormitories were built, and a few residents admitted that there were no real safety issues. However, despite any lack of evidence at all, they sold their houses and moved elsewhere. So indeed, Mr. Vincent, an ex-member of the Singapore Democratic Party, was not wrong to say, in other countries, when a politician says something that could be viewed as xenophobic, a spike in hate crime sometimes results, and it may not be entirely different in Singapore. This is to show that it is perhaps the stigma that exists in the government that perpetuates stigma amongst the population. So the next time you hear baseless comments being made by friends or family against migrant workers, you need to remind them that it is their intolerant attitude that perpetuates the hate, and show them that social integration could be a possibility for Singapore. As with most social issues, the first step is to change your attitude, and the second step is to donate. You can donate your time or your money to the NGOs such as these that work on improving the lives of migrant workers. And something interesting that I recently found out is you could also donate your old phones. Yes, this is something that takes zero effort, and an organization called Transient Workers Council has started to collect old 3G phones. And by April 2017, 2G phones would have phased out, and the workers who were using, so you could contribute to their lives in this way. So as you can see, it is not very difficult for you to make a difference in their lives. You can start by showing a simple smile or even sing. Thank you.
A lot of like the companies that mistreat their workers, right? And then in the solutions, you said that we can donate and everything. But is there a way for us to like change the company's treatment of the workers? Because it seems like we donate and stuff, it doesn't really affect like the capital, like the company's normal business or capital. I think.
So like you know that the organizations that I mentioned, one of them is called the Humanitarian Organization for Migration Economics. So when you donate to this organization, it actually works towards changing laws that govern migrant workers' lives. So that would indirectly affect the way companies treat migrant workers. And also the other organizations work towards the workers' medical aid, and there are a lot of these have subsidized law firms that support the workers in getting their basic rights. So in terms of like a top-down approach, I mean that is up to the government. So which is why we suggested this approach more like a bottom-up.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions.